It was a terrific first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and as we wrap up a weekend of 5 Game 7s, we're now finally on to round two. Welcome to the J&J Podcast, where we discuss all things hockey from around the world. I'm Jackson Starr, joined alongside Titus, and today we will start by discussing certain topics and headlines from around the NHL, and then we're talking some first round storylines from the Eastern Conference, followed by Eastern Conference second round predictions and those series going on. Then we'll do the same for the Western Conference, all together discussing the 8 series in the first round and then the 4 series in the second round. But first, as mentioned, we've got to discuss some hot topics going on around the NHL from teams outside the playoff picture. And first, some news out of New York with the Islanders firing Barry Trotz earlier, last week that is, and replacing him by Lane Lambert yesterday afternoon. An interesting move for the Islanders, replacing Trotz, a very, very good, strong coach with a good history with the Nashville Predators for many years, then going to Washington, winning a cup there, taking the Islanders to back-to-back conference finals appearances over the past 2 seasons prior to this, and now replacing him with a guy who was on the bench with him throughout a majority of his career in Lane Lambert, and a very interesting move for the Islanders, to say the least. Jake, I'll welcome you in here. Where do the Islanders go from here, and where does Trotz go from here as well?
I don't get this move. Honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense looking at it. I mean, you look at what Barry Trotz has accomplished in the NHL. He's been coaching since he's about 36. He's 59 now. Um, he's coached for 23 years in the NHL, and with that, he's had more than a positive record. With the New York Islanders, he's had more than a positive record. Yes, he hasn't exactly had the amount of playoff success as he would have liked in New York, but he made it to, I believe he made it to the third round last year, right? And he made it
Yes.
to the third
Yep.
round again the year
Yeah,
before.
back-to-back years, 2020 in the bubble, they went to the third round and lost to the Lightning, and then the same thing last year, they lost in seven. So, a win away and a goal away also from going to the Stanley Cup final in 2021 last year. So, you're coming close with a good coach. So,
It's it's certainly, if we're talking about Barry Trotz as a coach, if we're talking about him being fired from his position as coach of the New York Islanders, if it's having to do with Lou Lamoriello thinking he's just not good enough, I don't think that's at all. Like, I don't think that's right. I think
yeah,
it's way too early to determine that. I think one year where they don't make the playoffs, especially with a team like that, I think that's a bit ridiculous. Um, if it's more a thing internally where they're like, well, we need a fresher voice, it also doesn't make sense because that's one of the rumors that came out. There were rumors that guys,
yeah,
like Barzal, uh, weren't too happy with the way that Barry Trotz was coaching the team and wanted a fresher voice. Maybe somebody who was a bit more offensive. Understandable, but you replaced him with Lane Lambert, a guy who has been with his coaching staff since he was on Nashville, since he was about 36 years old. So I don't know what the move is here. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it'll be interesting to see on opening day. That's all I have to say for the New York Islanders. In terms of Barry Trotz himself, I mean, obviously he's been tied to the coaching vacancies in Winnipeg, Dallas, and
yeah.
maybe even another team that we'll get on to a little bit later. There has been some Toronto fans that said that maybe, hey, Sheldon Keefe,
Yeah.
if he gets fired, why not? Why
Yeah.
not throw a bone at Barry Trotz? I personally don't get it because, as we know, he plays a very, very strict defensive system, and yes, he lets guys who are supreme talents, guys like Alexander Ovechkin, break that system in order to produce offensively. But I have no idea how you treat a guy like John Tavares or a Mitch Marner or a William Nylander if he'd let those guys be as free offensively as they should be, as these dynamos. Um, Additionally, some Sens fans on Twitter also mentioned that maybe throw a bone at him.
Hmm.
Why not? DJ
Yeah.
Smith, he doesn't look like he's going to be a coach that's ready for the playoffs. And I mean, Barry Trotz, former Stanley Cup champion, the uh, two third round, appearances back to back very recently. But again, I don't know if it's the right move with all the prospects.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that relies on prospects. He's more reliant on veteran depth. You see it how he's mishandled Oliver Wahlstrom so far in New York, and you see it how he's mishandled Kiefer Bellows. So I just don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see where he lands next year. But in terms of the New York Islanders, yeah, I think this is a step backwards and a big one.
It's interesting because, the Islanders got off to kind of a bad start in an unlucky way this season. I think they started the season on like an 8, maybe 9 game road trip over the pretty much the
Yes.
first month of the season, and if you don't recover from that, that's largely because of their arena. I think it was completely because their arena didn't open in time,
Hmm.
but if that derails your season, and it makes sense that it could. You're on the road for how many weeks at a time. You know, if you can't really come back from that, it's very difficult right out of the gate to be able to kind of bounce back when you're on the road that much. And,
And
not to make an excuse, but I think that's a legitimate reason to kind of look at Trotz and say, okay, you led your team to the conference finals back to back seasons. Maybe this is just a one off because of the fact that the season started off in such an awkward, weird, strange way for a team that's playing in a new arena, under new circumstances after making a long playoff run last year. I mean, other than Tampa, we've seen pretty much every team that made it to the conference finals the year before struggle and take a step back. So, in the short off season, it really, really affected them, other than Tampa, who are still obviously in the playoffs. But is that the case with the Islanders, maybe? And is this a move that shouldn't have been made? Like you said, Jake, it's tough to understand.
I think another thing that has to be mentioned, you mentioned the slow start because they just kept on playing on the road.
Yeah.
A lot of people forget, we like to look back at the past with rose-colored glasses if we can, and I think people forgot just how bad the COVID situation was with players missing time
Yes, that
because
too.
of COVID. I mean, Ottawa was affected by it in the early months of the season. Toronto was. They weren't even playing at full capacity at points during the season. But one of the U.S. teams that was, that handled the virus the worst was the New York Islanders. At one point, they were missing over 10 players on their team.
Yeah.
And this was right after they went on that insanely long road stretch. So to me, it's no surprise that they didn't really have that great of a season. And so if the reason was that he was the scapegoat for this poor season, you have like 2 or 3 scapegoats. You do not need to fire Barry Trotz. I think it's a bit ridiculous. It's definitely jumping the gun there, and yeah, I just don't think it'll do the New York Islanders any justice.
Yeah, we shall see. It's going to be interesting to see how they come out and start the season off in October. Meanwhile, another team that missed the playoffs and that was just mentioned in the third round last season is the Las Vegas team out of Las Vegas, and Vegas struggling for the first time in their history. It's funny. I read a tweet. They they've how many years have they been in the league? 5, 6 years, maybe 7.
Since
They've
2017,
since
yeah.
2017 exactly. They've had 3. They're gonna have had 3 coaches already. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know. And they've made the playoffs every year other than this year, other than one in their history. I find that crazy. So they fire Pete DeBoer. That's the news
Yeah.
that's breaking out of yesterday. Um, Gonna be interesting to see where Vegas goes next and where Pete DeBoer goes next. I mean, DeBoer was in San Jose. Kind of the storyline behind DeBoer is that he's a good coach to get you into a playoff spot, and maybe win a round or two here or there, but unable to get over the hump and unable to get you to a Stanley Cup. And that's kind of been the discussion around DeBoer in San Jose. That was discussion for DeBoer when he was with New Jersey years ago. Now with Vegas, it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. And for Vegas, it's going to be very interesting to see who they choose to kind of lead this team to try and get back, this star-studded team to try and get back into the playoffs next season.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's I was never really a big fan of DeBoer to begin with. I thought
Yep.
firing Gerard Gallant was easily one of the dumbest moves that that franchise had made in a long list of dumb moves.
Yep.
Um, you know, I liken it back to the shiny new toy, right? Uh, Vegas came into the league. They came in with owners having no expectations whatsoever. They go through the expansion draft having no expectations whatsoever. They show up on opening day with 10 defensemen and have to bench a Russian superstar who they've just paid $4.5 million for the
Yep.
next 3 years and gave a $2 million bonus.
Yep.
They ended up letting him go after 3 games. because they were too incompetent to trade defensemen because they had no expectations this season. They figured, okay, yeah, we might not have succeeded on this gamble with Shipachev, but it's not a big deal. We're not going to be good. And all of a sudden, they started winning. And because they started winning, they got in their head. They were like, we're a contender. Their ownership, it got in their head.
Yeah.
We're a contender. William Karlsson is the next Jesus. Marchessault is also God incarnate. And Marc-Andre Fleury is the same until he became the devil.
There you go.
But, like, it's always about this new shiny toy. So after they made the Stanley Cup Finals and they had all this success, they were like, okay, well, this is the bar. We need to hit this. And we have to do whatever it takes, which isn't the right move. I mean, as we all know.
No.
But, in the heat of the moment, that's what they went for. So that's why they got, guys like Pacioretty. That's why they got guys like Jack Eichel. And that's why they got Leonard. And, it's caused them on a player side to be so tight to the cap. But for a coaching side, I mean, it's no surprise that it's a revolving door. But I think, honestly, all this has been doing is just making Vegas go from one of the hottest destinations for NHL players to one of the most despised. Because
Yep.
I think, maybe if you're younger, the money's not a big deal. But then again, they have no money because they're spending it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, Vegas is a great place to live. No state taxes. But the big thing to take here is players want tenure, right?
Yes.
You want to be there long term, and you want to get paid a decent amount of money. Vegas can't do any of that.
No.
So
Go
I,
ahead.
I just don't know. I mean, it's possible that, like, who do they bring in as head coach to replace DeBoer? I mean, honestly, there isn't really, like, a lot of good options at the moment. I mean, there is Barry Trotz. Don't get me wrong. And odds are, knowing Vegas, they'll do whatever they can to get him. But
Yeah. That's true.
besides Trotz, I mean, Mike Babcock?
Nope.
I
Oh
mean, he'll
boy.
set a culture, but that's about it.
Yeah. I think it's a very, very interesting situation. I mean, you see, it's a type of thing where, the team goes from a Cinderella story in their first year. Everyone's, wow, Vegas, look at them go. People either cheering for Vegas or not cheering for. I wasn't necessarily a huge fan in the first year. I thought, okay, eventually it's gonna come to an end. It didn't until the finals, but they've gone from that underdog Cinderella story of an expansion team to trading for Pacioretty, trading for Eichel, trading for Stone. And progressively they just haven't been able to do it.
Yeah.
And you speak about, players wanting tenure. You look historically at situations that have gone on within their organization. Shipachev, you said. Fleury just basically booted out the door after being the face of the franchise in the first year.
Qatar,
Thomas Tatar,
20 games.
exactly. Robin Leonard, even this year with the injuries and DeBoer, that was probably part of the reason why DeBoer is no longer there, in my mind at least. So, there are many situations that kind of show that this is a place for players that they maybe don't want to be. The culture may not be there. And even if you look at the Evgeny Dodonov situation, that's probably the biggest one. He's forced to come back to this team because the team was too careless to be able to look at his contract. I mean, if that doesn't show you how poorly management is, I guess, taking care or understands the situation of these players, I don't know what is. Maybe I'm wrong from thinking that on the outside, but if you talk about, in Toronto, it's quite it's been made clear in the past that Kyle Dubas makes sure to know his players, and that could backfire if you become too emotionally attached to some of your players. But there does have to be, to a certain extent, an understanding of what the player wants, what the player needs, and how the player feels. In Vegas, it seems like that is just not the case. And, if you alienate your players to a certain degree from management, it's going to be difficult to kind of find that groove to get back into an understanding of what could be achieved within the organization, like success-wise. So, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I think for DeBoer, I think he will find a coaching position again. Um,
Absolutely.
he's not a bad coach. He's not a bad coach. He led them again. He's led Vegas to the playoffs multiple occasions. If he is able to come into a situation like maybe even Winnipeg, where he can kind of reignite a core like that, I think it could potentially work. Going to be interesting to see overall
He
what
wouldn't even
happens.
be bad in Ottawa either. Like,
Nope, definitely not so. I agree. So moving on now to the next set of news coming out from around the league. Ryan Getzlaf, that is, he's retiring. Played his last game with the Anaheim Ducks a couple weeks ago, and Dustin Brown also retiring after the Kings were eliminated by the Edmonton Oilers. We'll get to that series a little bit later, but for Dustin Brown and Ryan Getzlaf, just two major parts of Southern California hockey, and that era from the 2010s and a little bit earlier on as well for the Ducks. Just a terrific couple of teams there that were butting heads, and even you throw in DeBoer with the Sharks there throughout the 2010s. Just a very terrific run of California hockey over the past 10, 15 years or so that's coming to an end and maybe kind of changing it into a different way, into a different light as the time moves on. But, the end of an era for a lot of people in Southern California and California hockey in the 2010s.
oh, absolutely. I think the big thing about this is that, you know, a lot of people didn't see California as a hockey state
Yep.
whatsoever. Um, you know, the LA Kings, yes, they had the whole Gretzky situation, but after that, I mean, they still struggled. The early 2000s were not good for the LA Kings. The Anaheim Ducks, especially in the early years, they really tried to break into the mainstream. The Mighty Ducks movie certainly
Yep.
helped out, but
Yes.
again, that was more or less just, for the first few years, and then the image faded a little bit. And for the San Jose Sharks, I mean, they had a solid rookie season, don't get me wrong, but again, long term, they didn't have the branding of a contender, and historically, they weren't winning enough to be labeled as one. And while, I mean, certainly for all these teams, I mean, they've had good players. They've had points before then where they were considered, playoff teams and such.
Yep.
I really do think this is the end of an era for an era of excellence for
Hmm.
California hockey. I mean, truly, because you look at guys like Ryan Getzlaf, you look at guys like Dustin Brown. Not only were these players leaders on the ice in terms of their production, they were leaders off the ice. These were
Yes.
character players. I believe both players were at some point. I might be wrong, but captain.
Yep.
Yeah,
Dustin Brown was. Yep.
Dustin Brown was captain. He was stripped of the captaincy for Anze Kopitar, which I mean, it's a tough move, but he took it. He took it with a full stride. He stayed on the LA Kings for the entirety of his career,
Hmm.
um, which I mean is just a testament to his character.
Yep.
Um,
For sure.
Both of these players, they definitely play a little bit of an older style of hockey, one that isn't appreciated as much anymore. But both of these players could still play. Like next year, if you were to say, "Oh, we're going to pick up Dustin Brown in free agency, or we're going to pick up Getzlaf in free agency," I think I'd be over the moon.
Hmm.
These players could still play at an NHL level, and it is a bit of a shame, but honestly, it is their time, and these players have done so much for the league. I mean, I could speak to Getzlaf personally. Watching him in the 2007 Cup run was one of
Yep.
the worst things ever, and I mean that. I mean that with the most amount of praise. He was so dynamic on the ice, and he was a real game changer against Ottawa. So, both of these people, both of these players, um, with what they did in the NHL, you know, the 2007 Cup for Getzlaf, being a key piece of Team Canada. And for Dustin Brown, I mean, being one of the major pieces, one of the major forces, especially physically in the LA dynasty. Truly remarkable what they've been able to do in their career. And, we wish them all the best afterwards.
Definitely so. Agreed 100%. I think, like just to wrap it up, I agree with everything you said, but to wrap it up, if you had told me that, oh, we're going to bring in Ryan Getzlaf for Dustin Brown in a bottom six role, you'd be over the moon for, a team that's looking to make the playoffs and make a run potentially just because of the experience that each of the guys bring. And that's testament to what they've achieved in their careers, and the role
Mhm.
models that they've been in their dressing rooms and for their teams. So, two legends retiring in Southern California and definitely a rite of passage in California hockey for sure. So we'll move on to the playoffs now, and we'll start with the Eastern Conference. Some playoff autopsies in the Eastern Conference, starting off with Tampa beating the Toronto Maple Leafs, and well, Toronto, oh boy, they lose again in the first round, fifth straight year in a row, and that. I guess the bubble is kind of a fluky one against the Columbus Blue Jackets, but still, they have not won a round since 2003. Um, where does Toronto that is go from here, Jake?
I don't know. Again, I mean, like, what does Toronto do to break this impasse? Like, honestly, I mean,
Crazy.
of course, you could say, all right, Tampa was fantastic. There's no doubt. But the thing is that all the people that have been saying, oh, Tampa was the better team. It's not necessarily that. It's that they showed up more.
Yeah.
Tampa was the underdog. You can't make that excuse. It's the as much as people want to say, well, okay, but like, the Leafs did a million times better than they did the year before. Which, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, they looked like a playoff
Yes.
team this year. The
Yes.
year before, they did not.
Mhm.
Um, like, you just cannot make that excuse.
Yeah.
This is a team that is supposed to go long in the playoffs and has failed every single year,
Yep.
0-10 in
Yep.
series clinching games. I mean, yes, the goaltending was great. The defense was great. The forwards were great. But, if I'm Carl Dubas, what are you supposed to improve on?
Yeah.
Because
It's tough.
you have a limited budget, because you're tight to the cap. Jack Campbell's allegedly not returning,
Yeah.
which I don't know if that's because he wants more than what the Leafs can offer, which is entirely the case given their budget, or if it's just they wanted to see other goaltending options, which I don't think they'll be able to do with that cap, or at least competent ones.
Hmm.
It's really difficult. It is extremely difficult to imagine what they can do. I mean, you can tear it all down, or at least retool a bit. But
Yep.
it doesn't sound like Toronto's going that route. It sounds like they're just going to kind of keep the core the same. They're going to keep a lot of the depth the same, make a few minimal changes. But at this point, you're nitpicking, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So you trade Justin Hull because he had a few bad giveaways. So you trade Alex Kerfoot because he had a few bad giveaways. Are the odds that you'll get two players for approximately 2.5 million, because that's about what their cap is, shared between. You get two
Yep.
players for 2.5 million, one defenseman and one forward. Are they going to be as good as Alex Kerfoot and Justin Hall?
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people like to dunk on Justin Hall. Analytically, he's been good this year. He's been a positive in most categories, including defense.
Yep.
Are you really going to get a player that's as good as them for 2.5 million each? And will it be good enough that it will make a difference in that series? Because the East is stacked this year. There's
Yes.
no doubt about it. And honestly, it wouldn't even be shocking if it was stacked next year.
Yep. I agree with you. I think it's a difficult situation. If you
I
go ahead.
I just like, what is there to say? I mean, this is a team that has failed, 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 failed. It's failed time again,
Yeah.
and they're going into this as if it's just maybe their second series loss.
Yeah. Well, I think moving on, it's going to be difficult to them, and I guess it's not really
Mm.
good to look at what's happened in the past, and but from a series standpoint. I really thought Toronto had it. I mean, you look at the game one, they dominate, they win 5-1, I believe was the final score, right? And they looked
Yep.
all over Tampa, right? Tampa looked tired. Honestly, Tampa did look, to me, Tampa just looked tired. They look like they've played a lot of hockey in the past few years, which they have, definitely.
Hmm.
And, the Leafs took advantage of that in game one. Game two, Tampa comes out, they play well. Leafs fight back at the end, but they can't make it enough. Game three, Leafs win again. They hold off the Lightning. Game four, Lightning blow them out again. Leafs battle back, though, later on in the game. So you see, it seems like, the Leafs would win a game, Tampa would battle back. Leafs win, battle back. Leafs win, Tampa battles back. So from that standpoint, in my opinion, it looked like the Leafs had it. Maybe not in game six, but when they were up 3-2 after they won game five, I definitely thought they had it. It looked like it was in the bag. If they don't win game six, they're winning game seven. How can they lose again? They look like they're playing with drive, more drive than they have in any playoff series over the past few years. They look like they're playing to win and like they know how to beat this team. It looks like they know how to beat this team. They have the goaltending, like you mentioned. Everyone was basically shut out. I mean, how can you pinpoint one person? You say Kerfoot made a couple bad giveaways. Hall, of course, had the bad play in Game 7 and obviously had a couple bad giveaways. But again, like you said, you're nitpicking. There's not really one player on the Leafs that had a bad series. You're not putting Matthews scored. Marner was great all over the place. Nylander produced. Tavares was great in the last few games of the series. He had the goal in Game 7, but was called back obviously because of the penalty. But you know, you can't really pinpoint one thing that went wrong, and it looked like they had it again. And the fact that in my mind they couldn't capitalize on a poor Vasilevsky for 6 games, because you kind of know Vasilevsky's going to take one game. Not to say he was necessarily, he was good in Game 7. He was much better than he had been at any point in the series in Game 7. And the fact that they couldn't capitalize on a lackluster Vasilevsky, or just not a great Vasilevsky over the first 6 games of the series, that's not good enough. That's not good enough for them from this series standpoint in my mind. They got very good goaltending from Jack Campbell, and if there was a year that they looked like they were going to move on to the second round, obviously last year it looked like they pretty much had it in the bag before completely falling apart. But if there was a series where they looked driven, more driven than any year to finish it off, this year was the year that I thought they would get it done, and they couldn't. So it's demoralizing for a fan base and for a team, I would assume. To
So does that mean that maybe it's a system issue? Because I
yes,
mean,
I think so.
really, a lot of the opportunities where Tampa was flourishing um, was, I mean, they were cutting off Toronto from the middle, which is their sweet spot.
Yeah,
They weren't
exactly.
allowing them to go kind of in the middle of the ice. They forced them to the outside, and they forced them to take lower danger chances than they're accustomed to.
Hmm.
And of course, I mean, it's the Maple Leafs. They have friggin' Austin Matthews, one of the greatest goal scorers, of this past season. Of course, he's going to score. you
Yes.
know. And they have John Tavares. They have William Nylander. They have Mitch Marner. Of course, they're going to score. But obviously, even the greatest, even the greatest players won't be able to score every single time on low danger chances.
Hmm.
So, I really think that it's a system issue, and I don't think that Sheldon Keefe's the right guy.
Yeah,
And
I
maybe
think
they
so.
go for honestly, maybe they go for a guy like DeBoer. I know it doesn't make sense because he has his playoff troubles as well, but he's an offensively minded coach that has a decent enough defensive scheme. Um, I feel like he would be a fit in Toronto.
Mm.
Generally speaking, I mean, Trotz, he would make sense, but he wouldn't be a fit.
Yeah.
But Pete DeBoer, you would be probably more of a fit because you'd probably allow Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner to play the offensive games that they're used to,
Yes.
while trying to keep a system in place defensively. And yes, of course, Sheldon Keefe with the trap this past offseason has also been very good. But again, there was just way too many defensive breakdowns anyway. So, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tough off season for Toronto. I think you go through the draft, you focus on that now, and then you spend the week or so until free agency, and that's when you really contemplate what are you going to change.
Just don't bring back Babcock or Carlisle, and you're fine.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
moving on to the next series,
Or
Florida,
Maurice.
defeating the Washington Capitals, and for Washington, they gave the Panthers a run for their money. They really did battle hard. They were a beaten down bunch. They were not necessarily healthy throughout the season or in the playoffs, and they gave Florida a tough ride in that first round series.
Yeah. I think the big story here is that Washington wasn't playing with a healthy team.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree with that.
that being said, I mean, they didn't really have a lot of depth to begin with. They were playing with a lot of prospects in the lineup and a lot of weaker depth pieces. They did try to bulk up during the trade deadline. They acquired Johan Larsson, who might seem like a small addition, but very, very good defensively in terms of analytics, and he's having a breakout year. The only reason why it hasn't been as prominent was because of an injury he sustained where he missed about 20 games. But yeah, even more of a testament to how injured that group is.
Yeah.
Um, of course, we have Ovechkin getting the injury right before the playoffs. Nick Backstrom apparently has injured his hip, and he was told it will never fully heal. So he's exploring potentially retirement or whether he's going to even play next year or surgery. Carl Hagelin, he took the eye injury, I think, at the beginning of the season or so. Um, he's also exploring retirement because of he's apparently never going to get his full vision back in his eye. You had TJ Oshie, who missed most of the season this year. Um, just a lot of bad luck, a string of bad luck for the
Yeah.
Washington Capitals. And this is a team that is, I mean, they're not built to go deep in the playoffs, but they're built for the playoffs. They play a physical game. Garnet Hathaway, Tom Wilson, certainly Alex Ovechkin can play a physical game.
Yep.
Even some of the younger guys like Marin Faravari, he could definitely turn it up physically as well. This is a team that was built for the playoffs. Maybe we didn't give them enough credit
Yep.
in our predictions,
Yep.
but no, they certainly battled hard and they gave Florida a run for their money, even if they came away losing. My big question here is, like, do they try to salvage the team again by adding in free agency? Try and keep maintaining that status as a playoff team until
Mhm.
potentially Ovi's retirement, or do they try to retool? You know, do they trade a few guys for some prospects here and there, or some younger players on other teams, and try to give Ovi one last good run in 2 to 3
Yeah.
years? I don't know. I mean, I'd personally go with the second route, but I also understand the first route because, of course, Ovechkin, it really has to do with his legacy here at this point. He's won a cup already, so he doesn't need the other cup, of course. I mean, you always want another cup, but
Yeah.
he doesn't necessarily need one. It's not like he's gone his whole career without one. But I also feel like you would be doing a disservice to one of the greatest goal scorers of all time if you just kind of let him tread water for the last couple of years
Definitely
and
so. Yeah.
keep on losing in the first or second round. So
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that they had a couple good pieces in the play. I mean, you still have Mantha around. We'll see how he does next year. I think he was injured for a large majority of the year as well.
that as well. Yeah,
So there are good pieces there. There are good pieces there. They have a solid goaltending tandem, and they have the ability to again make the playoffs. And once they do get there, like you said, they're built well for the playoffs. It's going to be interesting to see if Nick Backstrom's done for his career. If so, like you said, do they bring in someone from free agency to try and salvage something? Because I think that there's potential there if they can squeak in, get good goaltending and make a run in the next year, 2 years or so. We'll see.
Hmm.
But again, it's kind of a sign of an end of an era for the Washington Capitals that's near to be coming. They haven't won a series since 2018, since when they won the Cup.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be interesting to see where they go and what they do next to try and get to the next level, or maybe kind of settle down. But like you said, is it doing a disservice to Ovi? Which in my mind it is. Anyhow, next
Hmm.
series, New York against the Rangers. That is against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Penguins are up 3-1 in the series, and they looked like they had it, but then suffering with injuries. Rangers battle back, and as they storm back in the series, take it 4-3 in Game 7, overtime. Panarin getting the winner in OT. Is this the end of the dynasty era, really, for the Pittsburgh Penguins? Malkin and Letang, both free agents. Going to be a very, very interesting offseason for the Pittsburgh Penguins here, with a lot of free agents.
Yeah. I think it is. I think the big thing here is they have about $25 million in cap for this offseason. And they have to sign a whole bunch of people. So in terms of like restricted free agent, the big one is Kasperi Kapanen. He's still going to get a decent contract. He was pretty solid this year.
Yeah.
In terms of unrestricted free agents, I mean, of course, you have Evgeny Malkin. I mean, we don't really have to talk about his legacy. He's a
Yeah.
fantastic player. He's been the number 2 to Crosby since his career started. The number 2 to Crosby uh, since about like 2007,
Yeah.
2000,
Yeah.
2007. The year
Yeah.
before was friggin' Mario Lemieux.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
then, Chris Letang, who again, he's been the key defensive piece. I mean, not necessarily defensive, but key defenseman on the Pittsburgh Penguins for the last, 15,
15
16,
years. Yeah.
17 years. Like, I mean, these are two players that, when you think of the Pittsburgh Penguins, certainly if you don't think of, Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, or, a Sidney Crosby, these are players that you think of right afterwards.
Hmm.
Um, people said it was kind of the end of an era when Fleury ended up going to Vegas. I think this is truly where it all ends if Malkin and Letang do end up going to free agency. And it does sound like Malkin's certainly exploring that possibility, because he mentioned to the media that he doesn't want to take a discount,
Yeah.
which I think for
Interesting.
the Pittsburgh Penguins, with guys like Brian Rust, uh, Ricard Raquel, and Evan Rodriguez, who of course had that wicked start to the season. I just don't know if they'll be able to, actually accommodate both Malkin and Letang. I think if you're going to keep one, probably Letang, just because I think he'd project better longer.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a tough loss. And I think another thing is that if you're to look at this, if it wasn't the fact that they were up in the series 3-1 and they lost it, they
Hmm.
blew that lead,
Very good point.
I think we wouldn't be talking about this. I think, Malkin would maybe be a little bit, more likely to re-sign on a cheaper contract. But because of this, I certainly don't think it helps the case. And not just that, I'd also like to mention that I didn't really appreciate what Sullivan did for Game 7. We don't know about Raquel. We don't know about Crosby. We don't know how bad their injuries were.
Yeah.
Crosby's apparently not necessarily a concussion. They could entirely just be saying that. We don't know. And with
For a
that
guy with
history,
sorry to jump in, but for a guy
it's
with concussion history, yeah, exactly.
it's concerning. But
Yeah.
Tristan Jarry, they brought him back for Game 7.
Hmm.
I don't think it was necessary. That's not to say that they couldn't need him. Certainly they could, but he was spotted post-game limping heavily with a makeshift cast made out of bubble wrap and ice packs. And,
Yeah.
it's not a good look for the franchise. And I certainly think you could have gone with not necessarily better options, but better options in terms of, you know, I mean, Tristan Jarry is your starting goaltender. He's
Yeah.
25 years old. He's had a fantastic year this season. Of course, it's important that Tristan Jarry is playing, absolutely. But you want him to play at his best, and if not his best, at least close to his best. And what that photo of Tristan Jarry post game showed is that he was nowhere close to being his healthiest.
Yeah.
Not
Definitely so.
even a sliver close. And so I don't agree with that, and I think it's a bad look for Pittsburgh, honestly.
Yeah, definitely so. It definitely taints, you know, Malkin and Letang probably's perspective on returning. Like you said, if it wasn't if the role was reversed, if they were down 3-1 and battled back and then lost, maybe that's a different story. But because they were in such a good position to move on, and because of the way things turned out in those last 3 games, it's discouraging for them moving forward in my mind. All right, one more Eastern series that concluded in the first round. Carolina Hurricanes beating the Boston Bruins in 7 games, all home teams winning in that series. And going to be an interesting offseason for the Bruins as well. Patrice Bergeron was very, very slow to get off the ice after the loss, hugging all of his teammates on the way to the dressing room. What is that mark for him? Is he going to return? Is he going to retire? Lots of discussion going on around the Bruins, and that center depth that they have possessed in the past quickly going by the wayside, especially if Bergeron's not there next year.
Yeah, I mean, this past season with David Krejci going back to the Czech Republic, there were rumors that it was allegedly only going to be for the majority of the season, and he'd return around trade deadline. Of course,
Yeah.
those rumors were put to bed a couple weeks before trade deadline when Krejci said, "I will be finishing my season over there, and I am probably going to be playing there next year." Um, it's all right though. They did have Eric Holla, who I mean, while he isn't a one-to-one replacement for Krejci, he's certainly filled
Yep.
in the role of a 2C very well. I know a lot of Bruins fans that are very happy with the way that he's played, and he's been relatively injury-free as well, which is good news for a guy with such a history like that. Um, but if Bergeron goes, I can't imagine Eric Holla being a great 1C. It was already a hard enough role to fill in the 2C on a team like Boston. And you look at all the contenders nowadays, a lot of them are very strong down the middle, right? You've got
Yeah.
Toronto, where they have, Matthews, and they've got Tavares. You have Edmonton, where they rolled 3 lines. They spread out their top talent to 3 lines, so they had McDavid on their first line, they had Draisaitl on their second, they had Nuge on their third.
Yeah.
Uh, all down the middle. And you've got Florida, right, where they have Alex Barkov, and then on the second line they have Giroux. These are all teams that are doing very, very well during the regular season. I'm saying that because Toronto obviously didn't do good in the playoffs, but these are teams that are successful, generally speaking, and they've cracked the formula that you need to be strong down the middle. And if your 1C is Eric Holla, I'm afraid that's going to be very difficult if you're trying to emulate the success of these teams, especially in this generation. Bergeron's a fantastic player. We know that. I mean, if he's allegedly, thinking about retirement, I think it's pretty ironic that he was nominated for a Selke still.
Hmm.
It just shows how good he is.
Yeah.
He's such a good two-way player. Great offensively, great defensively. Not a lot of players like him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if he does retire, this might be the end of the label of being a contender. Truly, I mean, of course they'll still be a playoff team. I don't think anyone's doubting that, but I just struggle to see them having any shot at truly winning the cup besides going on a fluke run. On some brighter news, though, Jakub Zaboral, former first-round pick in the 2015 draft, signed a 2-year extension for over $1 million. He's a player that's battled through a lot of injuries throughout his short NHL career so far. And because of that, he's been often, given the bust label, which I think is maybe a little bit too early given his circumstances. But He's been given another opportunity to hit the ground running. He was offered the main roster spot this past season, and he had a leg injury, which took him out for the rest of the season. So hopefully, like I said, he hits the ground running, and he becomes another capable defenseman on the team that's already full of capable defensemen.
Definitely, yeah. So, yeah, I think that that's a positive if you're going to look at from the Bruins as well. And then also from the series perspective, we spoke about in the first episode just the lack of goaltending experience playoff-wise with Ullmark and Swayman. They both gain experience through this playoff run. They both started games, they both played in games, and both played pretty well. So, that's something that moving forward will benefit the Bruins in net. Moving on to the two playoff rounds that are going to happen now in the East, starting tonight. The Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers, the Battle of Florida, set to take off for the second year in a row. We'll start off with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They came into the playoffs with a 51-23-8 record for 110 points on the season. Nikita Kucherov led the way in points in the first round of the playoffs. He had 2 goals, 6 assists, and 8 points in 7 games played. Victor Hedman was second, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points in 7 games played. And Andre Palat, who had a good series as well, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points in 7 games played. The starting goaltender, of course, is Andrei Vasilevskiy. He had 7 games played, a 304 goals against average and an 897 save percentage. Not what you expect from Andrei Vasilevskiy in the first round. 6 lackluster games from him. In Game 7, he was quite solid in closing the deal on the Toronto Maple Leafs. The last playoff appearance was last year, of course, in which they defeated these Florida Panthers in 6 games, then the Hurricanes in 5 in the second round, before defeating the Islanders in 7 games, and then finally the Montreal Canadiens in 5 games to win the Stanley Cup for the second year in a row. This year, of course, they take down the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7 games. The Leafs were the second seed, Tampa Bay was the 3 seed. And on the road, they take down the Leafs in 7 games. A lot of interesting storylines for the Tampa Bay Lightning coming into their second series in a row against the Florida Panthers. Depth has been very good for them in the first round. The top performers haven't been necessarily what we've seen from them in the past. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Tampa in the second round. And from a goaltending standpoint, if Vasilevskiy can bounce back, take the game that he had in Game 7 and carry that into the second round as well.
Yeah, as you said, Vasi needs to play at his absolute best. We need Game 7 Vasi. We do not want Game 5 Vasi if we're talking about the Toronto series. There's a lot of key points for this, for this team. I think one of them has to be, first of all, how bad is the Point injury? Because Point is such a dynamic player for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's been a major part of, their Stanley Cup wins, and he was a major force in the Toronto series. He did end up getting a leg injury in Game 7, to which he tried to tough it out, but he was unable to do so and was visibly crying in pain. So if this is something that, is so bad that he's out for the entire series, let alone the entire playoffs, this could really derail Tampa's chances. That being said, I do believe that they have the depth to kind of accommodate injuries, but with such a good player like that, it's whatever accommodations you have are never really going to line up one for one. And obviously, if it's not as bad as it looks, he'll be a key factor in the series as well, but it looks bad.
Yeah,
I think another thing to mention is that Tampa's a team with a lot of depth. First pair, second pair, third pair on defense, all very, very solid. Not a lot of flaws. Of course, Sergachev had a few bad giveaways here and there, but guys like Cal Foote has been honestly a dynamic player this past series. I don't know how he was doing necessarily offensively, but when I was watching the games, I noticed he was really good on the breakouts, and he even jumped up to be kind of a fourth forward on those breakouts. But he's got good passing. He's very, very calm in his own end, and he makes a lot of smart plays. So looking forward to seeing him do that again in the Florida series. And also the third line of Nick Paul, Brandon Hagel, and Ross Colton has to keep rolling. They've been great, but there's still been a few mistakes here and there. You can definitely tell the playoff inexperience from Brandon Hagel. Nick Paul looks like he's calm, cool, and collective though. Um, they've shown to be very effective at shutting down, um, but they really need to limit some bad giveaways.
Mhm.
Ross Colton and Brendan Hagel haven't been too good at that. I mean, generally speaking, they've been, you know, passing the puck decently effectively,
Yeah.
but they've had some bad giveaways, which have turned into very good scoring chances for Toronto, and against a team like Florida, where I mean, every shot is going to be a high danger shot. This is a team that is one of the most effective in terms of offensive games in the league. They really need to tighten up defensively and also keep up that offense because, as we said, Nick Paul just unreal.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely so. I think something also that can't be underestimated that Tampa possesses is the cup experience. You know, it's pretty obvious to kind of
Mhm.
pinpoint that, but when you win back-to-back Stanley Cups, and for example in the series against Toronto, you're chasing the series, a majority of the series, and they played a very, very good road game in Game 7, you know, getting it down, blocking shots, Sorelli, winning faceoffs at key points of the game. You know, I don't think that the experience that they possess can be underestimated and undervalued in a series like the one that they just played, and in a series going up against the Panthers. You know, they have the ability to when the going gets tough in the playoffs, they have the ability to find what they need to find in order to win. And you know, like you said, there's a lack of experience with that third line, yes, but if your key guys have been there, which they have, then you know that helps in bringing those guys along to assist in moments like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how they can kind of find that against Florida because they did chase the series against Toronto early and pretty much throughout until the end. So I think it's going to be an interesting series, and I think again the outlier is going to be Vasilevsky if he finds his game again. Moving on to the Florida Panthers. The Panthers came into the season tops in the NHL, 58, 18, and 6, 122 points, one of the best seasons in NHL history. The playoff leaders so far for them in points is Carter Verhaeghe. Verhaeghe with a terrific series against the Washington Capitals. 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points in 6 games played. Claude Giroux's second, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points that is in 6 games. While Alexander Barkov is third with 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points in 6 games played as well. The starting goaltender was Sergei Bobrovsky, and he will undoubtedly play for Florida in this series. 6 games played, a 279 goals against average, and a 906 save percentage for Bobrovsky. Not bad, but also could be better for the former two-time Vezina Trophy winner. Last playoff appearance was last year, in which they lost in 6 games to these same Tampa Bay Lightning, and this year they defeat the second wildcard team in the Washington Capitals in 6 games, as we spoke about a little bit earlier. Interesting for the Panthers. Of course, they're looking for a big run. They were, as mentioned, given a run for their money against the Washington Capitals, but coming into this series is going to be very interesting to see if they can rectify those demons from last year against the Lightning.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, the last time they were in the playoffs, they ended up losing to Tampa. So
Yep.
will Florida be able to avenge that? I think with this team, it's definitely a possibility. They have a lot of guys on the team that they've added this year, the likes of Mason Marchment or Claude Giroux, that could
Yep.
really elevate the game of Florida to go past potentially the Tampa Bay Lightning, a team that of course they've had their demons with. They've
Yep.
had their battles with. It'll be it'll be very it'll be great to see another interstate game.
Yep.
Seeing as of course, there's the Edmonton versus Calgary series that we'll get onto later.
Yep.
But yeah, so the last time they were in the playoffs, Florida did lose to Tampa. I think one of the big keys uh, that they really have to kind of polish up on is their power play. I believe they were 0-15
Yes.
in the first round, which obviously is not good. I mean, to be basically striking out on your power plays, it's never a good sign,
No.
especially if it's consistently striking out and you're just never ever ever scoring on there. As really against Tampa, Tampa's such a good 5-on-5 team that you want all the opportunities you can get to score, and especially shorthanded. And
Yeah.
if they're not able to capitalize on that, that could be a very big turning point in this series. Um, Another thing to mention is that, of course, Vasilevsky was very underwhelming against an offensive team like Toronto. So
Hmm.
Florida,
Definitely.
being again one of the more premier offensive teams, are they able to get the job done, or will Tampa's good defensive system be able to contain a team like Florida? I think another big thing to mention here is that while yes, Carter Verhaeghe had 12 points in 6 games, remarkable.
Yeah,
Um, it is of course unlikely that he's going to keep up that same 2 point
of
per
course.
game pace.
Yeah,
So you really need to make sure that all your guys are firing on all cylinders, and that includes Jonathan Huberdeau. A lot of people were saying that he could be nominated for the Hart Trophy with the way that he played in the regular season,
hmm
but 3 points in 6 games doesn't make it seem like he's trying to go for the Conn Smythe. So he's really got to step up his game in order to be an X factor in the series, and um, especially with Mason Marchment being out game one, you really need all the scoring depth that you can get. And if Huberto's only scoring depth and not a top tier scoring talent on that team, it could hinder Florida in the long run.
definitely so. And just quickly to say, congratulations, Florida. You won a playoff round for the first time since 1996. So there you go. That's something good to shine on. Um, Game one of the series gets started tonight. I also do think it's going to be interesting to see the goaltending matchup. We mentioned Vasilevsky, but Bobrovsky had his moments in the series against Washington. He was solid at points, sometimes not as great at points. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does. And if Bobrovsky does come out, again, we spoke about this in the first episode, Spencer Knight on the bench. If he is to come in, it's going to be interesting to see how he does. I believe, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe the season series between these two teams, pretty much every game has been very high scoring. So,
Oh
like
yeah.
back and forth, tit for tat. So, I'm very curious to see. Last playoff round these two teams played last year was very entertaining, back and forth as well. So, I'm curious to see if that energy is once again found in this series. Obviously, two very high offensive teams, or if Florida doesn't get their power play going, and Vasilevsky, shuts the door like we've seen him do in the past, is that going to be just the opposite, and will it be a more low-scoring defensive series? We shall see with the two high-powered offenses. Going to be interesting to see where this series goes. So prediction time. I'm taking the Panthers in 6. I think they rectify those playoff demons from last year against the Lightning. I think they come out, play well. Huberto finds his game, and the Panthers dethrone the champs in 6 games against their arch rivals in the Tampa Bay Lightning.
I'm going to say Cats in 7.
Okay,
I
nice.
also agree that the Panthers are going to defeat the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think it'll go just a little bit longer. I think with the way that Tampa's built, they're definitely built for those, to be a late game team in terms
Yep.
of how long they're going to go in the series. I don't think that they're going to lose in 4 or 5. But if they do, it's going to be pushed to the edge. So I'm going to say the Panthers in 7.
Awesome. So let's move on to the Rangers and the Hurricanes. And this is going to be an interesting series, to say the least. We'll start off with the New York Rangers. Rangers come in 52, 24, and 6 on the season with 110 points on the year. The playoff leaders in points so far, Mika Zibanejad, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points. Very, very strong series for Zibanejad in 7 games played. Adam Fox is second, equally, or just a little bit less, but equally as strong. 3 goals, 7 assists, 10 points in total in 7 games played, while Chris Kreider had 5 goals, 2 assists, 7 points in 7 games played as well. The starting goaltender, Igor Shesterkin, a lackluster series for him as well. 7 games played, 3.67 goals against average, and a 9.11 save percentage. The last playoff appearance came before this in 2020, which was the play-in loss to these Carolina Hurricanes in 3 games, clean swept in the 3 of 5 series. And this year they beat the Pittsburgh Penguins, that is, which was the 3 seed in 7 games, coming back from being down 3-1 in the series to move on to the second round and take on the Carolina Hurricanes. Again, some interesting storylines for the Rangers. Igor Shesterkin was not good, especially on the road in that series against the Penguins. He was better at home, but not great on the road. After a very, very strong, I don't know how many saves he made, but a lot in game one against the Penguins, in which that series went to, I believe, triple overtime. So, Shesterkin's struggling. if he finds his game, obviously that means the Rangers can, figure something out and get going against the good Hurricanes team. But, a lot of storylines for the Rangers going into the second round series as well.
I think the big thing to take if you're the Carolina Hurricanes is that Igor looks human.
Yeah,
This is a
definitely
player
so.
who certainly hasn't looked human this entire season. I mean, he's been on another level compared to Jacques Plante.
Yeah, yeah,
One of the best comparisons you could ever get as a goaltender. I mean, he had points in the season where he was at a 950 save percentage. Like
yeah,
that's just fucking unreal. Like there's no way to go around that. But this past playoffs, he's I mean, at home, he's been great. Don't get me wrong.
yeah,
At the MSG, he's in his own element. But despite what he's saying in interviews, where he's like, they say Igor, I say okay. Whenever the Pittsburgh fans were cheering his name to try and get in his head, he's been terrible on the road. An
yeah,
835 save percentage.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I wouldn't even wish that on my worst enemy. Like that's straight up an Eschel number.
yeah,
Like not a good look for Igor, and it's tough. But the good news is that the team is in great hands goaltending wise, because even if like Igor were to get pulled, Georgiev has had a 935 in 2 games in relief. So
yeah,
should they start the series on their heels and maybe they end up going to Georgiev, it won't be the worst thing in the world. I think really the two big factors is, of course, Zibanejad keeping up his very good offensive play. He's known to be very streaky. Of course, last year he had an okay season for. He was playing okay for the majority of the season, and then he had 2 7-point games almost back to back, which
yep,
elevated him to I believe a point per game status at the time. So he's very streaky offensively, so it's very important for him to keep up his production to some degree. But I think another major factor in the series is the fact that they've been without Barclay Goodrow since game one.
yep,
He's suffering from a broken ankle. It's a major blow to the team for a team that already doesn't have a lot of depth. I mean,
yeah,
really, this series all lies on the top end talent of the New York Rangers. A little bit of defensive depth, and then goaltending performances. So it's going to be a tough series for Carolina for sure.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry,
For the
against
Rangers,
Carolina for sure.
yes.
Yeah.
One point that I'd make is I credit Gerard Gallant for sticking with Shesterkin.
Mm-hmm.
There was discussion after a couple of games on the road that maybe he's not the starting goalie for Game 5. Maybe you turn to Georgiev, who's been better in relief. No, he stuck with his guy. Saying I basically saying that Shesterkin's the guy he's riding with. He has the ability to perform at a level that we haven't seen in many years from any goaltender. Credit Gallant for sticking with him, and it gets them through this series. And I think that definitely does good for a team in the playoffs and in a situation like this, because if you look at the past, teams that have bounced around goaltending wise, it hasn't really necessarily worked out well for them. You look at Vegas last year as well in the third round when Fleury made that gaffe. You put in Leonard for Game 4, but then back to Fleury. It just doesn't work well usually. So the fact that he stuck with Shesterkin, I credit Gallant for that. As for the Carolina Hurricanes, they come in with a 54-20-8 record on the season, 116 points total. So far, the playoff leaders points-wise, Jacob Slavin has had a great series against the Rangers, the Bruins, that is, from the back end. 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points in 7 games. Tony DeAngelo also on the back end having a great series, a goal, 7 assists, and 8 points total in 7 games played, while Vincent Trocheck led the way for forwards offensively, 3 goals, 4 assists, and 7 points in 7 games. The starting goaltender, discussion, of course, with the Carolina Hurricanes, but Antti Ranta, in 6 games played, had a .237 goals against average and a .927 save percentage. A lot of discussions around the Hurricanes. You can talk about the goaltending, whether Freddie Anderson's going to be healthy enough to come back, if Ranta's going to be the starter. Obviously, the back end of Slavin and DeAngelo has been terrific. A lot of discussions around this team going into this round, and a team that's poised to make a long run getting by the Bruins in the first round, they gave them a tough ride, but the Hurricanes going into this round just looking for more of what they had, especially when they were on home ice.
Absolutely. A lot of the offensive players on the top end have been performing very well.
Yep.
It's very tough to see that, of course, with the great performances of Jacob Slavin and Tony DeAngelo really coming through. I mean, being over a point per game as a defense pair is unreal.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
there's no other way of putting it. I think we knew that DeAngelo was going to be great, just given his history with the New York Rangers and how well he performed there. Also, that'll be quite an interesting talking point during the series. Being a former New York
Yes.
Ranger,
Yeah.
coming back to a team that pretty much shunned him out of the building. So it'll be interesting to see who makes who shut up, really.
Yep.
But I think some of the big factors, of course, it's very similar to what we said in the first round, but they just need to make sure that, all their lines are firing on all cylinders. This is certainly, in my opinion, it's a little bit of an easier series for the Carolina Hurricanes than it was in the first because, Boston has a little bit more depth and they're a little bit more physical. But, New York is not a team to count out. They still have that wicked top line and they have great goaltending. So you really need to make sure that all your players are firing on all cylinders. Jared Stahl was very good. He had 4 points in 7 games, which I know is not great, but as a depth player, it's kind of what you want. And defensively, he was also fantastic. He was winning about 60% of the faceoffs, so just need to keep that up on that end. And just very Kotkaniemi needs to turn it up a notch. He had 0 points in 7 games, -4 in the series against Boston. As you know, he's not exactly known to be very consistent in the playoffs. Sometimes he plays very well, sometimes he doesn't.
Yep.
And he just needs to turn on the Jets a little bit. But as you said, goaltending is a bit of a concern. Well, not really a concern, but just a question in Carolina.
Yep.
Antti Raanta has been fantastic, .927 save percentage. I mean, insane.
Yeah.
And people were expecting that he'd be good. I mean, Antti Raanta, nobody's doubting him. But 927 is not exactly what people were expecting. And, should Anderson come back, which, I mean, there is no update on a return yet, but was noted as a week-to-week injury as recently as the 7th of May. Do you give the crease to Freddie? A guy who's likely, Vezina nominee, if not potentially, a guy who could win the Vezina, or do you keep riding Raanta?
Yep. It's going to be interesting to see, for sure.
Yeah, and should they switch for Frederik Andersen, a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience outside the first round, how will that affect Carolina?
Definitely so. Good point. So prediction time here. I am, going with maybe the doubters, maybe the other side of things. I'm going with the Rangers in 7, and the only reason is because I think Shesterkin finds his game. I'm riding the Shesterkin train on this one. I think that the Rangers will find their goaltender, and we will see the goaltender that the Rangers know that they have and that they have had in the past. And, I think that the Hurricanes, while they do have that top end talent, like you said, Kotkaniemi struggling. He was really, really poor. I think they capitalize on that, and I think the Rangers, based off the back of their goaltender, find a series win in 7 games. I think this is going to be a fun series here. Obviously, it could go the other way, and the Rangers could kind of fall off, but I think that the Rangers have the ability to win, and I'm sticking with them in this prediction.
I like a lot of the players that the Rangers have. Savannah, Jad, Kreider, having such a great season in terms of goal scoring, even though most of them have been tips. Panarin, obviously, Adam Fox, fantastic. Jacob Trouba's been an absolute force. Shesterkin, but besides them, there's not a lot going on. I mean, that's not to discount the rest of the players on the Rangers. Lafreniere had a good first round, which is a good step forward for his development, but looking at their depth, it's awfully thin.
That's true.
I think, depth wins championships, and so I really can't say that the Rangers are going to beat Carolina, so I'm going to say Carolina in 5.
Fair enough.
I think the Canes have got this series. As much as I trust Georgiev, this past series with the way he's been playing historically, he hasn't been a great backup goaltender. He's been very shoddy. yes, he could steal games, but also he can blow games. And I don't know if Shesterkin's woes in the first round just because of how much of a pattern there is. I don't know if it's gonna go away. I certainly don't think it'll be as bad as it was in the Boston series, but I think Carolina is more of a team to capitalize on that. So
Yeah. One thing to point out also, the Rangers lost 2 games on the road in games 3 and 4. The Hurricanes lost every game on the road against the Boston Bruins. So, home ice advantage clearly probably going to be a massive, massive factor in the series. If you find a win on the road, it's going to be very key for whoever does in this series. So now we'll move on to the Western Conference and a couple of the series that ended in the first round. Calgary Flames beating the Dallas Stars. And the Stars, we didn't give them much credit. They fought really hard in these 7 games against the Calgary Flames. Jake Ottinger with a terrific performance, and that's an understatement. He was absolutely outstanding, keeping the Stars within a goal, within a chance to win. And you get to Game 7 overtime, anything can happen. He was able to get his team to that point. Just a terrific series for Jake Ottinger, and credit the Stars for battling against a very good Flames team.
oh, absolutely. I think the big thing to mention here is Jake Ottinger. A lot of times people say that the NHL is unlike the NBA. Because with the NBA, you really have about 5 players, and really one player could steal a series. I mean, you look at what happened with oh god, I'm gonna butcher the names, but you look at what happened against the Phoenix Suns, right?
Yeah, Luka Doncic. Yeah,
Luka Doncic
yeah.
had as many points as the Phoenix Suns did in
In
I
the
think the
first
first
half.
quarter.
The first.
Oh, the first half.
Yeah,
That's even
first half.
crazier.
Yeah, yeah. It was the first half.
You see what I mean? Like
Yeah,
one player
definitely.
can really impact the game and sway it in the other side. And with the NHL, if you have a great player on a bad team, generally speaking, they can't do that because it's there's 4 lines, and even
Yeah,
if they're a defenseman, there's 3 pairs. Of course, you're going to be playing about 20 minutes a night, but those other 40 minutes, you're they're gonna be roasting and toasting. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But with goaltending, you're in the entire 60 minutes. Hopefully, if you're good.
yeah.
And Jake Ottinger has been not just good; he's been fantastic. I mean, genuinely, what a 957 save percentage,
Yeah.
something fucking wild like that. You
Crazy.
don't see that. I mean, this was definitely a battle of goaltending. And the only reason why that the Dallas Stars lost was because that's all they had. I mean, up front they didn't have a lot of production from their top end guys. Ropey Henson and Jason Robertson weren't as good as they were advertised in the first in the regular season. That's not a bad thing, of course. I mean, these guys were fantastic in the regular season, but you know, it kind of felt like the team didn't play with the sense of urgency that Jake Ottinger did.
Yeah.
And
That's a
boy,
good
did
point.
Jake Ottinger play. Uh, the Dallas Stars gave him all 3 stars for that final game in Game 7, which was absolutely deserved.
Yeah.
Jake Ottinger, as Jacob Markstrom said of the Calgary Flames, he's got a bright fucking future. And I
Yeah.
think he could really be one of the top goaltenders in the league, especially if he plays like that in those key moments. So
Definitely so. It's going to be interesting to see if the Stars can build a team around him. Also, they like you said, kind of lack that same urgency that he did, and it's going to be an interesting offseason, interesting next couple of years for the Stars, with a couple of guys maybe coming off the books. But we shall see. As we move right along quickly to the Oilers and the Kings, very good series here as well. This one going 7 also. The Oilers beating the Kings, and for the LA Kings, again, they too put up a very good battle against the good Oilers team, and a couple of surprising pieces that were very good. Jonathan Quick was one who kind of found a resurgence from what we've seen in his playoff performances in the past. A couple of guys who have really come through, Andreas Athanasiou, Alex Edler, were all very good. Sean Dursey on the back end as well was great. So, very good pieces for the Kings who came through in this series, putting up a tough battle against the Edmonton Oilers.
absolutely. But I think one thing to mention is that even though Alex Eller did provide that physical force, and Fantasy, I believe I texted you midway through, I think Game 7 or so, that he was almost like a mini McDavid out there.
Yeah.
just with the way
Yeah.
that he was kind of generating these rush chances and almost scoring on there. But a lot of the guys who did perform are in contract years.
Hmm.
Um,
True.
and, LA is certainly a team where they have a lot of money put into their top guys. Kopitar is on a very expensive contract. Drew Doughty, I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But they also have a lot of guys, prospects coming up. They've got, Arthur Kaliev. We mentioned Sean Dursey, but Jordan Spence on the back end. They have Quinton Byfield, Alex Turcotte.
Yeah.
Lots of fantastic prospects in the system that, will be eyeing for playing time, scratching for playing time next year. And it'll be interesting to kind of see what's going on with LA if they do decide to bring back these guys, because yes, they were great in the series, but obviously you've got to get the ball rolling in terms of prospect development, and there's certainly kind of a backlog in Ontario, their AHL team.
Yeah.
With their players. I mean, Akil Thomas, previously seen as a very good prospect, second round pick. Nearly a point per game player in the AHL last year. Only had about 1 point in 20 games for his first 20 games of the season. Constant healthy scratch. He did end up turning his game around a little bit near the end, but of course not the statistics you'd expect out of Akil Thomas, a guy who was on Team Canada's World Junior team and historically has been good in the AHL.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to limit the amount of backlog in the AHL, and the only way to do that is to let guys come up to the NHL who are ready, and doing so would mean that guys like Athanasiou, guys like Edler, guys who have proven to be great players in this past playoff series, really sticking it to the Edmonton Oilers, really pushing their buttons, letting them walk. And so which guys they end up keeping, which guys they end up letting go. It'll be very neat to kind of see their opening night roster for that.
Definitely so. I think also something to be noted is that, lots of people said they had a great season and they kind of punched above their weight. They did a lot better than people expected getting into the playoffs, and especially pushing a team like the Oilers to the brink of elimination. It's it's maybe something that a situation where you see them take a step back next year and maybe focus more on that development. But despite that, still, you have a lot of good pieces that are still on the roster. You've got a guy like Kopitar, you've got Philip Deneau, who's obviously been a terrific two-way center for them this season, putting up 28 goals. There are good pieces there. It's going to be interesting to see if they can find that again next season and maybe even bring that to another level. Cal Peterson will most likely be the starter, I would assume, next year, correct?
Cal Peterson, I mean, it's entirely possible. The thing is that Cal Peterson really didn't have a great regular season.
Yeah.
He definitely took a step back with that regard, and they don't really have a lot of. It's not that they don't have a lot of prospects that could fill in the role, of a backup for now.
Yeah.
Like they just don't have a lot. I mean, it's really Jonathan Quick had a bounce back season. In light of Cal Peterson having, I guess a step back
Yeah.
in terms of his play. They've got a lot of prospects: Matthew Villalta, Jacob Ingham, none of which are necessarily ready so far. They have a few guys that are producing well, in other leagues, but nothing solid as of yet. So their goaltending is going to be a major question next year.
So
whether they decide to move out a guy like Cal Peterson or add.
Yeah, definitely so. So I guess just to kind of conclude, like, they it's an interesting situation. Maybe they achieved more than what people would have expected them from this season. But moving forward, I'm curious to see how they handle the development of players if that backlog, does come back to hurt them in the future, because they do have such a deep system, especially up front. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Kings. Moving right along to the St. Louis Blues defeating the Minnesota Wild. Minnesota losing in 6, a year where they looked like they could have competed potentially for a long playoff run. They're ringing in really a new era here over the next 3-4 years with real cap difficulties coming up with the Zach Parisi and Ryan Suter contracts kicking in. It's going to be a very, very interesting offseason, and then the next few seasons, that is, for the Minnesota Wild coming up after a disappointing loss here in the first round, definitely.
Yeah, it's cap hell.
Yeah, really.
There's no other way of putting it. Next season, 15% of its cap will be dead, so that's 12.7 million, and then 2 more years of 14.7, which is basically
Crazy.
I mean, at that point, you're pretty much only spending to the floor. It's essentially the Ottawa Senators simulator. I mean,
Yeah.
but the difference is, of course, these are two teams that are at two different points in
Yes.
their kind of. They're at two different points. I mean, you've got Minnesota, who, of course, really tried to do a push for the playoffs this year. They added Marc-Andre Fleury. They added. I mean, not necessarily major pieces, but Nick Deslauriers, a little bit of physicality um, for the playoffs. But this is a team that it was built to at least do well in the playoffs. Give this team one big chance before all this happens, and they came up short in the first round, which is a little bit of a disappointment. But I do have to say credit to Billy G with the way that he's kind of handled the cap situation in Minnesota. It's honestly been very,
Yeah.
very good considering the circumstances. I mean, obviously buying out the two contracts, it was a tough move, but he handled it very well, signing a lot of his major players to extensions. The big one that wasn't signed was Kevin Fiala, who's currently on pace
RFA.
to being an RFA,
Yeah.
likely trade bait.
Yep.
So at least they'll get something for him. But you know, my point is that they won't have a lot of cap space in order to pick up guys in free agency, and if they aren't able to get it past the first round with Kevin Fiala, what will they be able to do without him?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also another point is if they weren't able to get it done this year with this core, with like you said, Fiala maybe being moved, unable to really choose much with the cap situation they're kind of divulging into. Uh, what what do you do from here? How do you move on from here? If this core couldn't get it done, how is a core with you know a cap space that's very very much hindered gonna perform if this one couldn't? So I think
Absolutely.
they've got an interesting situation, Minnesota. It's concerning in my mind. I'm curious to see how they come out of the gate next season, and what they do this offseason to try and facilitate this cap situation they're kind of going into. It's going to be interesting to see for sure.
I think the most notable thing, though, is that, I mean, Kaprizov, he was such a force in the regular season and in the playoffs that really, I mean, this is a guy, yes, he's in his second season, but he's about, 25, 26 years old,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Good point.
The next 3 years are the prime of his career,
Definitely.
after which he'll start
sure.
to slowly decline in terms of production. What Bill Guerin has essentially done is that he's thrown out the prime of his career. Because, I mean, really, like we said, if they're not able to get it done with this core, what could they do with a lesser core? Probably not much better. And, for a guy like Kaprizov, for a guy as talented as Kaprizov, it's a bit of a shame. That being said, I do trust Bill Guerin. He's obviously shown himself to be a very good executive.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised if he does try to pull some moves behind the scenes to get some guys on cheaper contracts. Potentially, as he's known, to get guys from the Minnesota area. I mean, Nick Bukestad, of course, he's a pending UFA, but Minnesota boy that they ended up getting for about $900K. So, they've done it in the past where they've been able to get guys on a hometown discount. So maybe he does that to strengthen the depth a little bit, but not much. We haven't seen him much on the trade front, but if he's able to pull off some trades to, really strengthen the team, kind of Moneyball style,
Yeah.
and try to keep them at least a contender to some to some bit, and not necessarily a cup chaser, then I think that's a success for Bill Guerin given the circumstances that he was given. So.
Yeah, definitely so. I'd agree. Moving along, we've got the Avalanche destroying the Nashville Predators. 4 game sweep, clean sweep. Nashville didn't really have a chance. One game went to overtime, and they kind of fought and won in Colorado, but couldn't find a win, and then returned home and lost two. Uh, it was a great season for the Predators. They kind of get unlucky with the matchup they have to face in the first round. An Avalanche team that's looking for a cup run here, and you know, unluckily they don't have Saros. The core wasn't necessarily where it needed to be, but just shut down by an Avalanche team that is on its way to a potential Stanley Cup run this year.
What needs to be said? I
Yeah.
mean, we told you so.
Yeah,
We told you so.
exactly. There you go.
Sutter said it best. It's a waste of 8 days.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
yeah,
But I mean, if we're being honest here, I mean, you really can't deny that they had a great regular season. If you're Nashville, that is the positive that you take out of this. If you look back on this season, come free agency, come the time when come the draft, come the time when you are, making trades and trying to improve this team. If you go in remembering that you just got swept in the playoffs, first round too, I think that's a poor mindset. You've got to remember the regular season you've had. I mean, Ryan Johansson,
yeah,
right? This is a guy who, he was traded 1-for-1 for Seth Jones.
hmm
As much as people say Seth Jones is, he's overrated and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this was Seth Jones when he wasn't overrated. This was Seth Jones when he was elite, traded 1-for-1.
yeah,
And, Ryan Johansson obviously hasn't been the greatest player of the last, 4 or 5 years. He's been on a bit of a production decline. But this season, man, he's come back full form. And it's not just him. It's, Matt Duchene. Matt Duchene's a player that really was considered, a top, maybe even elite 1C, in Colorado.
yeah,
Got traded to Ottawa, had a slow start, but he picked things up again. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't the same player.
yeah,
Again, he's back at a point per game pace. This is a team that, there's so much positives to take out of this, but just, it could be discarded and thrown away so easily just by this loss. Roman Josi, holy crap.
yep,
The season he had was fantastic, and UC Saros as well. It's not often you see a goalie playing that well and filling in the shoes of Pekka Rinne. We talked last episode about how Montreal goalies have had problems with filling in the shoes of a great goaltender that left right before. But UC Saros has taken almost no time to fill in the shoes of a Pekka Rinne. He's been fantastic, and to consider that he's under 6 foot, remarkable for a goaltender. So I think you really have to take out the positives from the regular season if you're in Nashville. I think you really have to re-sign Forsberg. Otherwise, this is a failed off season, and you've got to start delegating money to supporting the core.
yeah, definitely so. All right, moving right along. Unless you have another thing to add,
No,
all good. Awesome. Let's move right along to the playoff series in the Western Conference in the second round preview. So we've got the St. Louis Blues. They go up against the Colorado Avalanche, as we just spoke about. The Blues coming in with a 49-22-11 record on the season, 109 points for them. They're leaders in points for the playoffs. David Perron, very, very good first round series. 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points in 6 games for Perron. Ryan O'Reilly, he's got 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points in 6 games played. The former Conn Smythe Trophy winner in 2019. Vladimir Tarasenko, 5 goals, 1 assist, 6 points in 6 games played. While the starting goaltender, Husso started, but it was Jordan Binnington who really picked up the series victory against the Minnesota Wild. 3 games played, 3-0-0 with a 1.67 goals against average and a 9.43 save percentage. Last year, they lost in the first round against these Avalanche in 4 straight games, in the first round, that is. This year, they defeated the Minnesota Wild, of course, Minnesota being the second seed in 6 games. So the Blues, coming in off of a strong series, they were down 2-1 in the series. They outscore the Wild 15-5 in the last 3 games to fight their way back and take the series in 6 games. So it's an impressive team. It's a team with the cup experience, and it's a team going up against a very, very good Colorado Avalanche squad as well.
Absolutely. They've been great.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. That win versus Minnesota was just a testament to how deep the team is. Um, you know, at all positions. I mean, Husso came in as the starting goaltender. Didn't seem like he was the guy, so they went with Bennington.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, does he look nervous? Dude's been on fire.
Yeah.
He's been great so far. He's been known to catch fire, especially the hotter the situation is, the hotter he'll get.
Yeah.
So it'll be neat to see how he performs against a team like Colorado, a team that's been just utterly dominant this regular season.
Yeah.
But yeah, Perron's been terrific. There's been lots of scoring support, guys like Kyrou. The fourth line, like I mentioned, I mean, Alexei Toropchenko's been a great physical presence. He even, I think, got a highlight reel goal. Unreal.
Yeah.
And, their offense has been great as well. I think the statistic is that, after they started trailing the series, once Bennington came in, they were outscoring the Wild 15-5 to win, the 3. Mm-hmm. So, great offensive output. I think defensively they do need to work on. It a little bit. As much as I liked the Falk and Krug pairing last year, they haven't been as consistent defensively, and so they need to just make sure that they're playing their best hockey. Parayko's been great this year, but and then again we talked about Stanley Cup experience with Tampa Bay. A lot of the guys on St. Louis still have the Stanley Cup experience from a couple of years ago. So
yep.
This is a team that could battle through adversity.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, Colorado's going to give a lot of adversity, but it'll be neat to see if this is a team that could really push through that, or if this is a team that will break under Colorado's great offense.
Yeah, they did last year. I mean, Colorado has swept the first round twice in a row, and the Blues were victim to that last year. Do they use that as motivation? I would assume they do. And can they find something different from what the Predators couldn't in the first round? I mean, obviously the goaltending has been better for the St. Louis Blues and Binnington in this playoff so far than that of the Predators. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can find that and then use their experience once again. If Tarasenko can still keep up the pace, if they have that scoring depth, Kyrou performs as well, Perron maintains his scoring pace. I think that that's going to be a very, very big key to this series. But the key is going to be shutting down the top guys in Colorado and the depth they possess. It's going to be tough to do. I think this series has the ability to go long. We shall see. But moving right along to the Colorado Avalanche, and of course we've kind of been hinting at them, but they have been terrific both in the playoffs and in the season. 56-19-7 the record on the year, 119 points. Cale Makar leads the way in playoff scoring with 3 goals, 7 assists, 10 points in 4 games played. I mean, 10 points in 4 games. Early Conn Smythe candidate in my mind. Gabe Landeskog is second with 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. So a bit of a drop off there, but still very, very good in 4 games for Landeskog. And then Nathan MacKinnon, 5 goals, 1 assist, 6 points in 4 games played. The starting goaltender, Darcy Kuemper, he's been injured. Started the first 2 games of the series, went 2-0-0 with a 1.63 goals against average and a .934 save percentage. Going to be interesting to see if he's healthy as well, but we shall see. Pavel Francouz made a couple starts in there as well for the Colorado Avalanche. Last year, they defeated these St. Louis Blues they're facing this season in 4 games, and then they lost in the second round in 6 games against the Vegas Golden Knights. This year, as we've spoken about, they defeated the Nashville Predators in 4 games, Nashville having been the second wildcard team, Colorado being the first team in the Western Conference. Going to be interesting to see if a couple things can happen, if Makar can keep up the brilliance that he showed in the first round, and of course if Kuemper is healthy enough with the eye injury to start in this series as well.
Yeah, Darcy Kuemper's been unreal.
Yeah.
He had a slow start to the season. I think it was just adjusting from going from obviously being a player on the Arizona Coyotes, where the amount of high danger chances that he'd get a game is unreasonable, to a team like Colorado, where the amount of high danger chances he'd get in a game was pretty much near zero.
Yeah.
Um, so, he did have a lot of adjustment at the beginning, just making sure that he wasn't going out of his way to make saves and instead just letting, the shots come to him. But he's really come into his own since about December. And he's just been riding that train. So hopefully the injury doesn't derail his, his hot streak a little bit. I mean, what you want to do in the playoffs, of course, is ride the hot goalie, and he's been burning. So, Makar's been great. I mean, this is a player that people have even compared to Bobby Orr, and honestly, I can't necessarily disagree with the way he's been playing. He's been great offensively, and he's been able to come back defensively as well. It's a great two-way presence, and he could keep it up, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at this is another team, lots of depth. I mean, even with the additions of guys like Nico Sturm instead of Tyson Jost, which a lot of people thought was a downgrade at the time, turns out that it's far more of an even trade than people originally expected. And with the addition of Arturi Lehkonen, I mean, Colorado's really, really built this team up for a lot of success. And so, it's a battle of depth. The big difference is that I think if you look at the two teams and you look at the top lines, I think Colorado's top line is much better than St. Louis. Not to discount them or discredit them in any way, shape, or form, but I mean, Landeskog, McKinnon, Rantanen.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man! And then you've got the wicked pair of Cale Makar and Devon Toews. I mean, just absolutely unruly.
Yeah, it is. In my mind, if you're looking for a way that St. Louis can shut them down, you have to look at last year. You can't go. It's the type of thing with Tampa as well. You can't really go like tit for tat scoring wise with them. You can't try to keep up with them offensively. You have to find a way to get them to play your game, and it's tough to do. Vegas did it to a degree last year when they beat them. It looked like I remember Game 1 of that series last year in the Vegas series. I think Colorado destroyed them, maybe 7-1 or something like that. And then Vegas settled down, and they found a way to contain those guys and force Colorado to play more to their speed. If I'm not saying the Blues can't do that, but it's going to be very difficult. If they can, they can make it a series, especially if they get goaltending. But again, it's going to be difficult to contain. If you try to kind of keep up with them offensively and try to play to their ability, you're going to get beat. So it's going to be tough for the Blues in that regard, I think.
Absolutely. I do think if anybody can help them try to contain, shut down the Colorado Avalanche, it's certainly going to be guys like Ryan O'Reilly.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
Unironically, a former member of the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah,
but nevertheless. But, you can't, of course, just rely on one player to shut down the whole team.
No.
And you look at the team, I mean, they have a lot of great offensive depth, and they have a lot of, solid two-way players, like, for example, Braden Shen. Brandon Saad's not that bad at, playing defensively as well. Defensively, they've got a couple guys, that could also shut down, to a certain degree, but the big problem with St. Louis is that they have a lot of offensive players. And so, while they have Ryan O'Reilly and while they have a couple two-way guys, will it be enough?
Yeah, very true. Good point. Prediction time. I'm going with the Avs. I think it's pretty much the consensus for most people. The Avs will win the series. I'm taking them in 6. I'm giving the Blues a good chance to make this a little bit of a series. I think they fight hard, but the Avs are just too overpowered. I think that this is a year for them to potentially make a cup run, and I think that this is just another piece to their puzzle, piece to their run. I'm taking the Avs in 6 games.
I'm taking the Colorado Avalanche in 7. I'm a big fan of the Blues. I really like the team that they've built. I like a lot of the players on the team. And they do have that Stanley Cup experience.
Yeah,
they're built for the playoffs in the sense that, Craig Brewery, he's going to make sure that they play a physically imposing game, which will certainly slow down the Colorado Avalanche. but I don't think it'll be enough. I think Colorado will come out on the top, and they will make it to the third round.
Yep, I will agree. Moving on to the next series, the final series that we will talk about, and that is in this second round of this playoffs. Maybe one of the most anticipated series on the season. First time in many, many years these two teams have faced, the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames. We'll talk about the Oilers first. The Oilers coming in to this playoffs with a 49-27-6 record, 104 points on the year. The playoff leaders in points, Connor McDavid, of course, leading the way with a terrific series against the Los Angeles Kings. 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points in 7 games played. Evander Kane second with 7 goals, 2 assists, 9 points in 7 games. Draisaitl, 5 goals, 4 assists, and 9 points in 7 games, though he potentially is battling an injury, so we'll see if that impacts him. The starting goaltender for the Edmonton Oilers this past series, and going into this one for sure, is Mike Smith. In 7 games, he had a 4-2-1 record, a 229 goals against average, and a 938 save percentage, keeping up with that stretch that he had at the end of the year. Smith was terrific in the series against the LA Kings. The last playoff appearance for the Oilers prior to this year came last year in 2021 when they lost against the Winnipeg. Are you laughing?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Something came up. We'll continue the Oilers and Flames one, but it's not necessarily hockey related. It's sports related.
Okay.
And I don't know if you saw the news, but if you haven't,
No.
this will make you absolutely cry of laughter.
Okay, let me see.
No, don't look at your news at all.
Okay.
We'll just continue.
What?
I'll tell you afterwards.
Oh no. Okay. The last playoff appearance for the Oilers prior to this season came in 2021 when they got swept away by the Winnipeg Jets, who in turn got swept away by the Montreal Canadiens. And this year, they defeat the LA Kings in 7 games. The Kings were the 3 seed, the Oilers were the 2 seed. They remain the 2 seed, facing off against the 1 seed in the Calgary Flames. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Oilers bring to this series. McDavid was terrific in the first round, and he was terrific in Game 7. I mean, I think that everyone should go watch the highlights for Game 7 and just see the brilliance of McDavid, because I was blown. I don't think I caught. I actually did watch the whole game, and
two-way player.
Yeah, exactly. He's been absolutely terrific. Game 7, the stuff that he did in Game 7, especially the goal at the end as well, kind of capped off all of what he did in that game. And he's been terrific. Can he keep it up against the Flames? A deeper team in the Flames, but getting to the Oilers first. They've gotten help from their D. Their D has held up to a considerable amount against the LA Kings. They've got a bigger challenge in the Flames. Do they have the ability to kind of upset their cross-province rivals?
Well, I think one thing that we knew coming into the series was that Edmonton's defense core was going to be offensively sound.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
With Evan Bouchard, Tyson Barrie, there was no way to discount that. There was no way to discredit that. You knew that they were going to show up. But what we didn't know was that Cody Ceci was going to be among the best defensemen in the playoffs. He has as many... You good?
Yeah, sorry, I got a call, but keep going.
Okay.
No, I'm not.
What we didn't know...
Obviously. Go ahead.
What we didn't know is that Cody Ceci was going to be among the best defensemen in the playoffs in terms of points. I mean, he has 6 points in 7 games, tied with Morgan Riley in terms of points, which...
Crazy.
Cody Ceci, former first-round pick for the Ottawa Senators. Former bum for the Ottawa Senators. Sorry, Cody Ceci, but you weren't that great, especially in your last couple of years. But he's really turned his game around, and he's really looked like a dynamic offensive defenseman. Maybe it's Jay Woodcroft's system that's really, turned him into that elite defenseman he was originally projecting as a 67. But, ridiculous. Of course, then there's the, I believe, ankle sprain that Draisaitl had, which he did play through for Game 7, but, is he even able to play at the same level or play on it at all? I know at points he was playing, top-line minutes during Game 7 with that injury, and he was playing very well, but it's just, obviously this becomes a concern as, the series goes on, especially going against a more physically imposing team like the Calgary Flames. So it'll be kind of interesting to see if, how that storyline progresses. If, it heals and Draisaitl's fine, or he plays through it and he's fine, or, if this could be a bigger problem for the Edmonton Oilers, a team that, well, yes, they're certainly better in terms of depth than the last couple of years. They still struggle with that aspect.
Yeah.
And, of course, Mike Smith. I mean,
yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't know that Mike Smith's midlife crisis would be him turning into an elite goaltender. But, I mean, hey, all the power to you. .938 save percentage in 7 games. He had the 9th best goal saved above expected ever in a single playoff series since the stat has ever been tracked.
How about that?
There's no surprise that some people have even said that, if he keeps this up, he could be in contention for Conn Smythe. Which, as a 40-year-old goalie on the Edmonton Oilers, a guy that at some points of the season people thought should be sent to the minors or retire, like, this is wild.
Crazy.
Of course, Mike Smith is not necessarily known to be very consistent in the playoffs. Sometimes he can go on great runs. Other times he could be questionable.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's more or less the former and not the latter. So if he could keep this up, especially against his former team, the Calgary Flames, this could be a ridiculous series. Just in general, for hockey fans and potentially for the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah. He did catch, I mean, it's many, many moons ago, 10 years ago, but he did catch fire for the Coyotes in their run to the third round. Again, they lost that series against the LA Kings. That was basically the first time the Coyotes had ever done anything in the playoffs, and still is one of the only times that they have done anything in the playoffs. So, he has the ability to do it. We've seen it in the past, obviously, going on this run. It's unexpected, and it's great to see. And, yeah, the series is going to be a terrific one. But moving on to the Calgary Flames, they come in, obviously, with the advantage in the series, home ice advantage as the first seed in the Pacific Division. 50, 21, and 11 the record for the Flames with 111 points on the year. Playoff leaders in points, Johnny Gaudreau leads the way with 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points in 7 games played. He, of course, had the overtime winner in Game 7 against the Dallas Stars. Matthew Tkachuk is second, a goal, 5 assists, and 6 points, that is, in 7 games, while Elias Lindholm with 3 goals, 2 assists, and 5 points in 7 games. Jacob Markstrom, maybe overshadowed a bit performance-wise by Jake Ottinger in that first-round series. He had, in 7 games, went 4-3 with a 153 goals against average and a 9.43 save percentage. Overall, very, very strong for Markstrom as well. Last playoff appearance came in 2020 in the bubble when they defeated the Winnipeg Jets in 4 games in the play-in round before losing to the Dallas Stars in 6 games. They beat the Dallas Stars in the first round in 7, and they move on a face-off against the Edmonton Oilers in the second round in the Battle of Alberta. As mentioned, Markstrom, obviously a big, big storyline. If he can find the game that he had, he can find the game that he's shown that he's had in the series against the Dallas Stars. He can definitely be a difference maker in this series, much like Smith, and the offense as well. Gaudreau's been great. Can they come through? And Chris Tanev was not in the game in Game 7, so does that come back as well in the second round? We shall see with that great depth that the Flames possess. It's going to be interesting to see how the Flames perform in this series, especially with the team in the advantage, home ice, and of course with the Oilers being the underdog. The Stars were major underdogs in the last round. Can the Flames kind of fight that adversity as being the favorite in the series and come out on top in this one? It's going to be interesting to see.
I think my biggest concern is the fact that the series went 7 games. I know Markstrom had fantastic stats, 1.53 goals against, 943 save percentage, cannot be denied.
Yeah.
How good he played, but this is against the team where their scores did not show up. And while, yes, you could attribute that to, Markstrom's phenomenal play, and you could attribute that to, the Flames just having great defense. I mean, they threw a lot of shots on net, and a lot of it didn't go in.
Yeah,
and,
good point.
I think against Edmonton, they have a much better core. These are guys that are much more dangerous, especially if Draisaitl's in the lineup. And, I think Markstrom's definitely going to face a lot more adversity this round. That being said, it's very likely he'll battle through very well. I mean, this is, again, a Vezina candidate. This is a player who's played very good the entire season. and he's keeping it up in the playoffs. So he's certainly a hot goaltender. But yeah, if he can maintain it, if he can maintain that 943, I have no doubt in my mind that the Flames will win. But it's a real question. If I think this series is going to be a lot more closer than people expect, because a lot of people are going to say, well, okay, but the Oilers just have McDavid and Draisaitl. They don't have much else. But they've been slowly building their depth. They've got guys like Yamamoto and Jesse Puljujarvi, and their defense, as we said, is very offensively inclined. So I think while Calgary has a lot of depth and they're able to kind of turn on the Jets offensively, I feel like it might bite them in the ass comparatively to the Edmonton Oilers, who, I feel like they're more of a chaotic team, the Edmonton Oilers, and I think if they can bring out that chaos out of the Calgary Flames, a team that's generally good, I think the series can go either way.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me being very confident in the Oilers and what they've been able to do, but I think it's certainly a closer series than people would suggest. But again, a testament to their depth. As you said, Chris Tanev, the injury, if he's out, that might be a concern, but even guys like Michael Stone, who struggled to make the lineup for the Calgary Flames, has been fantastic this playoff.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
It'll be very interesting to see, the Flames lineups on the first game of the playoffs, of the second round.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't speak. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting. I think that this, you look back at a couple of series in the past few years for teams. This is a rivalry series. You look at the Leafs and the Habs who faced off last year. The city really rallies behind a team in these types of series, And now that the Flames, they win an emotional series. The Oilers, they win an emotional series that took them to 7 games, Those series make a fan base giddy about the next round. They make, they get the fan base ready for what's to come. And when you have an anticipated series like this that hasn't happened in so many years, the fan bases get amped up. The cities get amped up, They surround their team a lot more. And from a national perspective, I believe all of Canada is going to be circled in on this series. It's going to be great. So, I think that elevates that. I think that sentiment goes into the dressing rooms, both dressing rooms, that is, and both teams will elevate their play for this series and bring their best just because of the magnitude that this series is for both teams and both organizations. So, I think it's going to be a great series, maybe one of the best in the second round, and may the best team win in the Battle of Alberta. Prediction time. So I am going to take the Calgary Flames in 7. And look, the Flames are a great team. Oilers are a great team. And I think this series goes the distance. Either team could win, but I think the Flames have the edge. I think they had the edge in the season. I think they have the edge in this case. Game 7 will be at home if it does come to that, and I think this series goes the distance. Markstrom, once again, is very good. I think Smith maintains his play. If it's going 7, it's basically a coin toss. I think it does go 7, but I think the Flames, with the added depth that they possess, will take the step into the third round in this series. Going to be a great series, though, and I just can't discount the excitement that I have for this series. It's going to be great.
I agree that it's going to go 7. I think it's going to go the other way with the Edmonton Oilers coming up on top. I do think that the Flames are built, and I certainly will, even if they lose in the second round, this season's an absolute success. The Sutter hire was an absolute success. But I just don't know. A lot of their depth, while they have good depth, especially on forwards, I didn't notice them to be as great as I would expect. Even guys like Calle Yarncroke, who, when brought in, was originally considered a pretty solid piece for the team. Obviously Cousins with Elias Lindholm, and a decent player on Seattle and Nashville before that. He hasn't necessarily been as great of an addition as people originally expected. Being a potential middle six guy, he's more been like a third, maybe even fourth liner. So, with that regard, I struggle to see. It's not that I struggle to see, the Flames winning. It's just, as you said, if it goes to 7, it's a coin toss. And I think it'll go to 7. I think the Edmonton Oilers can really bring out the chaos in the Flames game. And, I think they'll win it in 7.
How great is playoff hockey? Like, I mean,
Fantastic.
like we talk about these series that just happened, and it was awesome. Like just
Yeah.
terrific series. I mean, the Penguins Rangers series thoroughly entertaining, and then we have all of this
Hmm.
excitement going to the next round. I mean, it's great. I can't wait. I'm so excited. And yeah, it's gonna be a great second round. It's gonna be a great third round. I like it's a great playoff just because there's so many teams in competition. You know, the Avs could go on a run, the Cats could go on a
Hmm.
run for the Panthers. The Lightning could go for their third straight. You know, there's so many great teams. The Hurricanes, throw them in there as well. The Rangers. You know, there are just a lot of great teams competing, and unlike previous years when maybe there was a round here or there that maybe you don't necessarily enjoy, but it's just terrific. It's been a terrific playoffs, and I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing what happens in the second round.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we go, I just wanted to mention the report that came
Okay.
out. You a big soccer guy?
Yes, sort of. I follow it.
Well, you a big MLS guy.
Yeah. Yes, I am actually.
So, as you are aware, Inter Miami came about in 2020. It's the team that's
Okay.
owned by David Beckham.
Yeah.
It would appear as though none other than Lionel Messi himself purchased 35% of the team
Wow.
and might potentially join the team in 2023 when his
Wow.
contract expires.
Holy, how about that? I mean, we're a hockey pod, but that's big enough news. That's huge.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um.
Look, good for him. Hey, it's going to happen eventually. I mean, if we're going to go to the soccer topic, I think Ronaldo's coming over here eventually, but that's crazy.
You
That's
think
huge
he's gonna
news.
come over?
Eventually. Not yet, but eventually I think he will. We shall see. But anyways, thanks for letting me know. I'm surprised. I just saw something right now as you mentioned it for the first time about it. So, anyways, good little way
Now,
to end off.
of course, he's been a little bit dismissive since that report came out, where
Ah,
he said, well, okay, I'm still under contract, so I can't confirm anything.
yeah, okay, no.
But
It's basically confirmed. Well, hey, that's big news. That's
yeah,
big news for sports in NA. So that's a big report. Anyhow, so that concludes the second episode of the J&J podcast. I'm Jackson Starr, joined alongside Jake Titus. Thank you so much for listening. We'll have episode 3 after the second round for the third round and moving on into the playoffs. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for listening.